Welcome to Experiential Design Week. I'm Eric Duncan, Senior Experiential Designer at IA Interior Architects. Each year, IA hosts Experiential Design Week to celebrate the unique role of art and design within our larger architectural practice. This year, we'll be joined in conversation by a roster of creative luminaries from around the globe to discuss their creative processes, to consider the value of experience, and ostensibly to draw connections between their work and our own. For each conversation, I'll be joined by one of my colleagues at IA, each of whom bring their own unique perspective and will also ensure that I won't be the only voice you hear this week. Today, I'm fortunate to be joined by Rich Villabrera Jr., a design manager at our Miami studio, and we're thrilled to chat with today's guest. The art world can be insular and detached, or it can be an explosive force for good. With massive events from Hong Kong to Hawaii and everywhere in between, Worldwide Walls is the world's premier street art festival, attracting some of the biggest talent on the globe to create even bigger change in the world. While the vibrant murals the festival produces are the most visible sign of its work, Worldwide Walls both enriches and contributes to communities on a global scale as well. Its founder is a multi-hyphenate who's collaborated with nearly every brand you know and love, and I am deeply honored to welcome him to Experiential Design Week. Jasper, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Jasper. I'm an artist, designer, art director, gallerist, curator, etc. Just surrounding the art world, just trying different things, dabbling in different things throughout my entire career. And one of them is doing mural festivals centered around community beautification, around education, and just around accessibility to art to the public through doing art in public spaces. And we do it in over 25 cities around the world. And this year we have about 9 festivals. There's still about 4 left that we're still putting together. And so our goal really, and my personal goal really, is to just get art to as many people as possible globally. So
I assumed it was, one festival a year. So I didn't know that this was like a 14 city annual event.
We average around like 10 a year.
Well, I know it's heavy, but I think it's appropriate to begin our conversation today by acknowledging the incomprehensible tragedy that happened in Maui in early August. For anyone who feels helpless about where to donate, we've shared some links in the show notes below. As a native Hawaiian, can you tell us how you're processing these events and how you've responded through your creative efforts?
Yeah, definitely. Well, number one, I should probably clarify, in Hawaii, even though we're born and raised in Hawaii, we don't call ourselves Hawaiians. Those are reserved for native Hawaiians that are indigenous Hawaiians. So then I know that if you're in California, you call yourself a Californian, but we don't do that here locally. So I'm just sort of from Hawaii is what I say. It was definitely hard because I grew up going to Lahaina. Like, it didn't happen on the island I live on. I live on Oahu. It happened on Maui. It happened in Lahaina, which is West Maui, which is a very sort of like major city, a very popular district within the Hawaiian Islands, and also a place that I grew up going to because growing up, I used to do lion dancing. During Lunar New Year, you play like the lions. So I would do that every year with my lion dancing troupe in Lahaina. So I spent a lot of time there. So it's sad to know that that's completely wiped off the map, that it's gone, and that a lot of people lost their lives. And so people in Hawaii, it's a small community here. It's definitely like small town vibes. Like, we all know each other in some way, or we're all maybe just 1 or 2 degrees separated. So since that happened, everyone across the board tried to find ways to provide support. It didn't matter what you did or where you're at in your life. Like, everyone tried to find a way to give back in some way. So as artists, we've been trying to give back through those methods. I personally we've donated directly to families, to charities, but also joined different initiatives. I'm right now running a print show, like a print run. A print exhibition with Studio Hale, where we're working with over 70 artists from around the globe to sell prints and raise money for Maui wildfire relief efforts. and we're hoping to do more work out there because we know that the recovery is not just going to be like in a year. It's going to be years, maybe even decades.
A lot of us wonder how to give back, but that seems to be the driving force behind everything you do. I mean, philanthropy seems like the business model. Am I wrong? How does this philosophy seem to find its way into so much of your work?
I always think that it's important to find ways to give back. And so whenever there's an opportunity to do so, like, and this is something that just like not only myself, but my family and I believe in as well. So whenever we can volunteer or give back in any way, we try to, we make the effort to. You know, the one thing that we do a lot of is, you know, art programs and mural programs for public schools, or also identifying areas that could benefit from our programs, and especially in underserved areas, especially with areas with public housing and low income housing. And we've done a lot of that, not just like through the festival, just personally as well. So it's always been an important aspect of my work and my mission. It's not always easy to do because I want to do it where I'm donating it and volunteering and giving back. Like, I don't want to charge public schools for murals. I don't want to, you know, I want to find a way to sort of donate that work. But, you know, at the same time, I have like 2 kids, you know, I have, you know, there's like expenses and everything. So I try to find a balance between all that to like be able to still take care of my family, but also still be able to give back to my community, not just here, but, you know, abroad.
So can you take us back to the origins of the World Wide Walls in Hong Kong, back when it was known as Powwow?
I grew up in Hawaii, and I think for a lot of people that grew up out here, like on an island, you kind of get island fever. Like, you want to leave. People are like, "Oh, it must have been amazing growing up in Hawaii," but then at the same time, you feel very isolated growing up here too.
Mm.
You can't like drive to a different state or to a different city. You're kind of just like stuck on your island. And so the first chance I got, pretty much when I graduated from high school, I left. And I lived in Portland for a little while. Then I went to art college in San Francisco at the California College of the Arts. And I lived in the Bay Area for about 6 years. But like most art college kids, at least a lot that I know of, is you don't know what to do with that degree. So I decided to, on a whim, move to Hong Kong. And luckily, my family is from Hong Kong. So it wasn't that much of a culture shock for me, and it was easy for me to sort of find my way out there. And the reason why I chose Hong Kong is because, you know, China is one of the manufacturing capitals of the world, and Hong Kong in a lot of ways is a gateway to that. And so I moved to Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong for about 4 years. But when I first got there, it was really about networking and connecting with manufacturers. So I met with the people that would do work for Ralph Lauren, for Steve Madden, for Coach, JBL, like, etc., just to sort of like learn like what are the steps, or how do I go about doing that. And I definitely learned a lot. I also learned, like, I just, at the same time, at least back then, like, you don't really have the capital to start a brand. Like, it's just like a lot of money and a lot of minimums to meet. These days it's a lot. It's like more accessible because, you know, they have like, you can like do like one-offs, and there's like different manufacturing techniques that don't require you to like make 200-300 of something. But back then it was like, whoa, I don't know if I can even like put that much in to do one thing. So while I was there, I was still very much interested in, you know, being a part of the gallery world, the art gallery world. Because in San Francisco, it was a big, very like art-centric city for a long time. Back then, there was tons of galleries, tons of artists that like lived out in the Bay Area. And I really fell in love with that gallery scene because at the same time, this was also before the advent of social media. So for a lot of artists, you know, being an artist can be a very solitary pursuit. And the only time people ever see your work or validate your work is if your art is in the show or in an exhibition. And I was in a lot of like different shows when I was in the Bay. And so I wanted to do that same thing in Hong Kong. And I took my portfolio around to different galleries. The way that Hong Kong works is that like all the districts are very sort of like specific to specific industries. So you go to a part of town and they only sell like appliances. You go to another part of town, they only sell like electronics. It's like very like specific. There's like different random things like all over, and they're all kind of like all next to each other. And so there is like a section of the city that's like just art galleries. And so I took my work around, and I got rejected by a lot of galleries. The reason why I got rejected is because they told me I was the wrong type of Chinese.
Mm.
What they mean by that is that like the hot commodity at that time was mainland Chinese artists, so artists from Shanghai, from Beijing, etc. Since I was American, then they felt that there was a less potential to sell my work, and so they didn't want to give me the chance or the opportunity to be a part of any show. As a reaction to that, I decided to start my own gallery. So there was this abandoned restaurant on like the outskirts of that gallery district. It was in Sayingpun. Sayingpun is more known for, at that time, for dried seafood and for offerings to like your deceased ancestors. Because what they would do is they would buy, it looks like piñatas. So they're like made out of paper, and they have everything from like sports cars to mansions to, luxury bags, and you like burn them. And then those objects and product will then be sent to your ancestors in the afterlife. So then that was known for like also making a lot of those kinds of things, plus dried seafood. So it wasn't really like a hip district at that time. But there was this restaurant that was abandoned for about a decade. And so then rent was cheap because no one was taking it. And so, took on the lease, painted the walls white, and turned it to a gallery. And the very first exhibition there was the very first powwow. And the intent and the mission behind that very first exhibition was, one, to kind of forget about the financial nature of it, like use it as a space to sort of like promote all types of artists. Because there weren't a lot of galleries in Hong Kong that promoted local Hong Kong artists as well, and also flying in artists. So that were sort of like within that genre, within that sort of new contemporary street art genre, the graffiti genre. And so I was doing a lot of that, and also try to like bring artists together to collaborate and work together and learn from each other, to also be open to like sharing process, because oftentimes the process leading up to the final piece can be more interesting than the final piece itself. And so kind of like almost seeing it as like an open studio situation where like you can watch artists work and create. And so that was sort of the goal. The reason why it's called Powwow is because I'm like really into comic books. I'm like a comic book nerd since forever. So Pow was a punch in the face, like, Adam West Batman. And that was how I saw the impact that art had on a viewer, and wow being the reaction to that. But Powwow is a Native American term, which is a gathering to celebrate art, music, culture. So I felt like it was like perfect. Also, generally just meant like coming together, which is what I wanted to do. And so we ended up starting that very first one there, bringing in all these artists to do that very first project, which ended up just really being an art show. And flew in friends from Australia and from London, from Taipei, Singapore, etc., to sort of be a part of that. And it went well. Ended up running that gallery for a few years. We wanted to make it a traveling show, but a friend of mine's here in Hawaii, asked if we could do it back home in Hawaii. And I had my skepticisms because I grew up in Hawaii, like where there isn't like this super like huge art scene. Like I wasn't sure if like anyone would be even interested in the work that I was doing or in this sort of project, but we decided to give it a try. The hard part was raising funds for it. A lot of sponsors didn't see art-related events and projects to be good vehicles to promote their brand. So I had to struggle. I had some sponsors that were interested and that committed, but then dropped out. So I was given sort of three options of either to cancel it, to scale it back, or to just go for it. I was in like my mid-20s at the time. So I just kind of went for it. I didn't really have as many like responsibilities. So I just pulled up the credit card, bought the flights, bought the paint, bought the materials, et cetera, et cetera. And the one thing that sort of like shifted for us that year, that shifted the entire festival moving forward, was that there was a wall in the parking lot of the warehouse that we were doing the project in, the gallery show in. And one of the artists, 123 Clan, said we should paint this wall. And we're like, oh yeah, we should. Like that's a good idea, because it kind of also fit a lot of the mission, right? It's like, we can share process. We don't own the wall, so we can't sell it. So we kind of get rid of that sort of financial, sort of pressure of it, of trying to sell work. It's in a public space, and then we can also always collaborate on like large scale walls too. So that was like the very first mural, and I pretty much like begged the neighbor, because it was like the wall, it was like the neighbor's wall, but access to it was like the venue's parking lot. So I kind of gave her like a win-win scenario. I said, either you can like let us paint it, and you might like love the mural and want to keep it, but if you hate it, then we'll paint it over. So you either get like amazing new artwork, or you get a freshly painted wall. So it's like a win-win no matter what. So yeah, so then we ended up doing that, and then from there we decided to just focus on public art. And from there we like did like that one mural. Then the following we did like 12. Then more recent festivals we did like 100 murals in like a week with like 120 artists, or and so we've been doing that work for like the past like decade.
And you talked a little bit about adversity just now. Obviously, you'd mentioned that your sponsors had pulled out last minute. Why was this event so important to you that you dipped into your own funds to put this on?
I think one of the reasons why is because I feel that it was a way to give art back to the people. I think running a gallery and also having my experiences with galleries in not only the Bay Area, but also in Hong Kong and different cities, like different galleries, even though that's not the intent, can sometimes feel elitist. And that's the same with like museums, right? These institutions can feel elitist, can come off as elitist sometimes. I mean, most galleries that I know don't want it to feel that way, but there are people that don't feel like they'd be accepted in these places, that they're not allowed to be there, or that if they go there, they wouldn't fit in. And so then they avoid it. I had my gallery in Hong Kong where people would be interested, but only watch from the outside. And I would try to invite them in, and they wouldn't want to. And so I know that happens. And I know, so a big part of it is like, if we put art in public places and turn public neighborhoods into open air galleries, we find a way to give art back to the people where there isn't that sort of perceived barrier between art and its viewer. Because an art at the end should be for everyone. It shouldn't be sort of like divided for like the rich. It's not for only the rich, it's for everyone. And so then that was like a major goal that we were trying to do as well. And I think at that time, I just really believed in it. I believed that like if we got enough passionate, creative, like-minded individuals together in one place, then something amazing would happen. And then we just had to try and see where I went. And I think I would have felt bigger regret not trying.
So how do you select locations for these projects? What's that process like? I'm sure you probably have like a giant map probably on the other side of your screen, and you're kind of like with like pins.
You know what it is? It's probably the same with you guys with like architecture, is that once you start doing it for so long, like that's all you see. It's like whichever way, like all you see is like architecture, and you're like, oh, that's kind of weird, or oh, that looks good, or I like that sort of thing, and no one else notices it but you guys, because you just trained your eye for it. It's the same thing with like muralists, is like you just like spot walls. You're like, oh, that would be a good wall for a mural, or like, oh, that's a terrible wall for a mural. Like there's just like too much issues and too much problems to deal with. So I think a lot of us have that eye where like we can just sort of like see what would be a good space or not. For us, a big part of it really nowadays especially is, choosing areas where it would be more meaningful and impactful for those areas. Like, like I said before, we would do projects in like public housing, underserved areas, in red line districts. We do free murals for like, the ACLU, for public schools, for libraries, for like schools, for, homeless children, and so, that's a big part of it. It's sort of like figuring out spaces that could really benefit, and where we can really create some kind of meaning and impact through public art. I'm also been talking to, the public safety and corrections and rehabilitation offices to sort of like provide murals for prisons, etc. So we're trying to like do all that kind of work, and see how art can benefit, and that's been an important aspect of choosing it. In the beginning, like a decade ago, it was like whoever would give us a wall, we'd paint on it. Because it was just so hard just to get a wall, to convince someone to let us paint on their wall was so difficult. Nowadays, we try to be more selective and more thoughtful about what walls we are painting.
And we all know the history of the event now. Powwow Hawaii was an instant and enormous success. Its popularity exploded, and suddenly this wasn't just a Hawaiian festival, but something that happened all over the world. What was that next step like? How did that happen?
It was like, I think what happens is like, after doing the first few, like you kind of had a proof of concept. People were like, oh, okay, like I see what this is. I see what they're doing, and what happened was people were like, oh, I want to bring it to my own hometown, but I don't know how to do it. So perhaps I'll reach out to us and see how we could, maybe offer advice or assistance on sort of making it happen in my town. And I've always been open to that. I'm kind of like anti-gatekeeping. Like I'll share everything, like to help you make it happen. Like I don't believe in that. I'll like, you ask me a question, I'll like teach you how to do it. So, I'm always for that, to sort of like spread knowledge is important. And so people started reaching out. They're like, hey, a friend in Taiwan and Taipei was like, I want to do it in my own town. I was like, yeah, let's try to make it happen. Like we'll guide you through it. We'll help out. We'll be with you step by step through that process to make it happen. And we did it in Japan. Then we did it, in Long Beach, California, San Jose, Austin, Texas, Cleveland, Worcester, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., Qatar, Rotterdam, Netherlands, Helsingborg, Sweden, Seoul, South Korea, Guam, etc. And we just kind of kept going,
Insane. Yeah, my first encounter with powwow was actually through one of the artists right behind you, is Nikos. I've been following him for a very long time, Rabbit Eye Movement, since I was in art school. So I was just like, when I saw powwow, he was like, yeah, I'll do this powwow thing. I was like, what's that? And then boom, that was what, 2015?
Yeah, he was like one of the early Hawaii ones. Yeah, like he was actually at my wedding, so then he like stayed at our house for like a month. He came early. Yeah, that's actually like an original painting that he did for me for like as a wedding gift.
I'm so jealous.
And so this isn't just about art, but it's, a real investment in the community. It's schools, it's workshops and studio spaces and film screenings, and let me catch my breath, and skate parks and concerts. Tell us about how you're using Worldwide Walls as this powerful tool to reinvest in communities.
I think we kind of see it as like a platform for artists. And because we've done so much work in different communities globally, like people will come to us like, hey, we want to do this. And for myself, like that doesn't always make sense for me to do it. So I kind of also come in sometimes as like an agent or like a project manager, like, hey, I think this artist would be great for it, or this artist or this artist. And so then we're also help to sort of like provide and find work for artists, both locally and abroad. And some is just like ideas that I have that I just want to try to make happen. And the hard part is oftentimes like, especially when you're sort of doing projects on like sort of city or federal land, there are certain steps to go through. And for a lot of artists, they don't know how to go through those steps or how long it might take to go through that process. So I try to come in and sort of use like at least my experience doing it to try to help them through that process and through that. And I've always been like an open book, like I said before, where like people will call me for help on projects or advice, or even like just like read through agreements.
And can you talk about the schools, the students that are learning art, mural making?
Yeah, for sure. So the reason why we started those schools is because we recognize sort of like the gap that existed in public school systems. So a lot of public schools, Hawaii for sure is one of them, is when there's budget cuts, which there often is with different departments of education, what they do is they tend to cut art and music first, because then art and music is not considered core curriculum. They're trying to change that. There's some schools where like they really believe in it, they want to keep art in there, and they'll fight against that being cut. But there's some schools that will like, okay, it's gone. So then the school that my daughter was going to, they cut out art like a few years ago. And so then there is no art curriculum, and they only get art curriculum if their teacher sort of brings it into the classroom. Otherwise, it's only extracurricular, and those extracurricular classes that are after school usually get filled up really quickly. So, there isn't like, and that's the same with music as well. Like those ends up being sort of like the programs that end up on the chopping block when there's no funds. So we felt, the best way to sort of combat that is to offer free art and music and photography programs to the public that are for young people. As we know, education and the youth is the future. Like if we're not educating them, then how is the future of our industries the future of our lives going to look like if we don't put some focus into educating, giving back to young people. So, so that's always been an important part. So then it's really sort of taught by volunteer teachers. I volunteer, we have different volunteer teachers, all like giving back to try to like do it, teach and give back in that way. And in recent years, I also try to like focus on sort of giving back to kids in underserved areas because then even more so, they're getting even less. We also learned that during COVID, it's even worse now, because after COVID, what happened was kids had to distance learn. A lot of kids across the world had to distance learn. The thing, at least in America, and I can say also for Hawaii as well, is that we didn't consider access inequity. We didn't consider that there are groups of people, entire communities, that don't have access to the internet, that don't have access to computers, to iPads. And if the public libraries are also closed, they really have zero access. And so these kids that had to distance learn couldn't distance learn. And so many of these kids, either they fell off the school system altogether, like they gave up on it, they like dropped out, or they're like 2-3 grades behind because they just weren't getting the education. And if we were lucky, then like as parents, we could have taught our kids. But there are also people that like live paycheck to paycheck that were at work, that like, and that couldn't or didn't have the time to sort of teach their kids. And so, you try to find ways to then provide resources and education. Also like be like, hey, it's okay that you dropped out. And there are a ton of career paths where you do not need a degree. Being an artist is one of them. Being an artist and designer is like one of those degrees where they'll never look at your degree ever. They're looking at your portfolios. Or like working in the film industry. If you're working in IATSE and the film unions and different things like that, like you don't need a degree for that either. Or like anything in trade, right? Like construction, electrician, etc. Like you don't need a degree either. So also about like, hey, there are tons of opportunities out there that exist. Like let us connect you to people that do it, provide classes to do it. And so like same musicians as well. You don't need a degree to be a musician. So let's provide these sort of like programs, classes, educational opportunities to sort of these people that and like, open their minds a little bit where like, hey, it's not the end all be all if you don't have a high school degree. Like there's a lot of opportunities where you can probably even like sometimes make more money than someone with a college degree. And then I think at some point in American history, we like stopped teaching trade and growing up Asian, like growing up Chinese, like it's always been like, hey, either be a doctor, accountant, lawyer, engineer, etc. Like these are sort of like these like successful careers that you should do. If you're not within this grouping, then you're like a failure. I would never believed in that. I was like, I don't want to be any of those things. But a lot of that is still sort of like taught to this day, and you're trying to like get people to like unlearn that in a lot of ways too. That they're not a failure if you don't have a high school degree, you're not a loser. That there are a lot of opportunities, and you can be very successful without a degree.
Just like you talked about, these events are what your outreach is pretty global, and you've worked really hard to make sure that your participants are just as diverse. Just like what you're saying, you're not dealing with just one type of artist or one type of people, that you've really been engaging communities on a larger base. Can you talk about your efforts to balance gender parity and what was once a pretty male-dominated scene?
Yeah, for sure. That's always very important to us. Like diversity is like very important. So, whenever we look at the roster, we're like, okay, how many? So one thing that I do right off the bat is make sure that at least half the roster is of local artists. Like if we're in Hawaii, at least half of them are from Hawaii or live here. If we're in Japan, half of them are Japanese artists. If we're in Korea, half of them are Korean artists, or half of them are from Guam, or etc. Right? We try to ensure that like at least half is a local artist. Then from there, we're kind of also looking at like, okay, gender, ethnicity, etc. Like, do we have a good balance between everyone? It's not like sometimes we like that's our target, and sometimes like artists aren't available, and we try to like find different ways. At the same time, like we don't want to curate just purely based on that too, because I want to be like, hey, I chose you just because you're a female. Like that's sort of like something that we don't want to like be like, hey, just because you're that, like that's the only reason why, because we want to choose you because you're a great artist as well. But at the same time, we also want to like sort of uplift and bring in emerging new artists too. and also bringing artists that have never done a mural before and teach them how to do their first mural. So, we try to find a balance between not just gender and ethnicity, and also where they're from regionally, but also like where they are at their career. Like it shouldn't just be all established artists. So we try to like mix it up a little bit, and also like different disciplines like sculptors, installation artists, video, etc.
Well, Jasper, I'm an art lover, so I can tell you what the value of art is to me, but I'd love to know what the value of art is to you.
There was a mother of 2 daughters, and people that live in public housing sometimes are embarrassed to say that they live in public housing because then there's stigma attached to it. And the thing is that you don't choose to live in public housing, you have to. And she had 2 daughters, and the oldest daughter was always afraid to tell people where she lived because she was afraid to be judged by people. And she told us that her youngest daughter told someone, it's like, oh, I live public housing. And that person responded by asking, oh, is that where all the murals are? And that small shift in perception like meant everything to them, because it kind of like they kind of gave them pride also on like where they were from, where they lived, and it meant it, and it like just was like so meaningful to them that like they can talk about it, and that there's people that like the artwork kind of like shifted the way that people saw where they lived. We did also another project at another school that was in danger of being shut down. And the one thing about some of the public schools in America is that the same architects they use for prisons, they use for public schools. And they use the same mentality, the same design ethos, the same aesthetics. And so one thing about this school is that it didn't have windows. They had these like big blank walls with like, and it was like, what was the thought process for this? For us, it was like, well, these are great for murals, like these big giant walls, inside of the school. So we had to paint like every surface of that school. Like we did like murals everywhere over the entire school. And they told us that the school is no longer in danger of being shut down, that the test scores went up. We can't take full credit, but we like to say that we helped to sort of like change, at least provide some inspiration to the children that were going there. It was an elementary school, so it's even more important. And also, like here in Kaka'ako, the area that we worked in wasn't an area that people cared about. It was kind of this like forgotten district. We painted murals there. One, it made the area feel more vibrant. It felt more alive because there was color and paintings everywhere. 2, what then happened was that people were interested in the murals and they went to go find them. They'll walk around, just try to find the murals. It created foot traffic. When you create foot traffic, it makes the place safer because there's just more people around. Then as people were interested, they also created tourism because the tourists were also interested in trying to find it as well. And so then that created even more foot traffic. As people are walking around trying to find murals, they're also discovering local small businesses, local shops, local restaurants, and they're partaking in those spaces. They're buying food, they're buying lunches, they're like buying product. And as these businesses grow, then a lot of people are like, oh, cool, like I want to have my business there too. And then more businesses get added. And so, it kind of like helps to sort of like change a neighborhood from the inside out.
So, as we know, you're an artist, curator, and an event organizer. And what ways do these roles intersect or inform the others?
I think they all sort of inform each other. I mean, I think being an artist, like it makes it easier for me to like run a mural festival because I know what the artist is going through when they're painting a mural. Because I painted murals myself. Like I know what they need, what they're looking for. I know there's an issue, like how urgent it is and what needs to be done to sort of get it going. So it kind of helps that I have that experience. So then being an artist and also being able to art direct and curate and project manage and run festivals, like it just kind of gives me the insight of what an artist is going through and what they're looking for. And also like I've been screwed over. So I also want to protect artists and also my friends too. So they all kind of like inform each other in different ways. But I think the one thing that is, I guess for myself, is that like I have an ability to like organize like a mass amount of people to do projects like this, which some people are like, how do you do that? I'm like, I honestly, I don't know. I think it's some kind of like self-abuse sometimes because I'm like, it's like so stressful and such a headache, and there's so much things that can go wrong, and you're like, so many people are like yelling at you all the time, and people ask you, why do you keep doing it? And I'm like, I don't know why I keep doing it. Must be like addicted to the pain or something. But then I see like how meaningful it is to people, so I keep pushing for it. But it's like not easy. You just honestly, like a lot of it too is like spreadsheets, like just lots of spreadsheets, so you can organize all your thoughts and ideas. And also, I think a big part of it, which I also still have a problem with to this day, is asking for help.
Yeah, I was actually curious about that. Like, do you have a team? I mean, I'm sure you have a team now at this point. I mean, it's not just all on Jasper.
Oh, teams are small. So like this last one that we did in Kalihi, we did about like 70 murals with like 85 artists. And we did them all in like community centers, public schools, the museums. It was really all planned by like my wife and I. There's 2 people. We did have like, on the ground, we had like a lot of volunteers to help on the ground, but in terms of organizing, putting it all together, pulling all the pieces together to make it happen was like 2 people.
Wow. So, I mean, maybe this is not the right question, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. So if people want to follow your example, like what are advice or best practices for starting a public art project, like would you give, even if it's just one mural?
Don't be afraid to cold call or cold email or cold DM or cold message someone that is already doing it, because they've gone through like all the rigors, the process, the hell of trying to make those things happen, and they might have advice. And most people that I know that are in the industry that do it are more than willing to share or help in some way. You know, and the worst case scenario is that they don't get back to you. Like that's the worst case scenario. Like I've cold emailed a lot of people where like, okay, nothing. That's fine. It's not, but sometimes they get back to you and you learn a lot. You know, be open to like finding mentors. You know, understand that like when you're coming up that you don't know everything, even though sometimes when you're young you think you do, but to sort of humble yourself and know that you don't, and that there are people that have been doing it for a long time and that are more than willing to share. And also like just be involved, like volunteer, you know, go to a festival that you admire and volunteer, watch how it's run, you know, be there on the ground, be present, you know, use those opportunities to be around people in person and ask questions and build relationships. Because that's why I said people like, if I'm not flying this many artists to like a certain area, then be around. Like if you're a young artist that wants to come up, like be there, ask questions, offer help, or just like be present. And you can learn a lot from just like being present. And I think for younger people, it's like harder because they're so like social media, like all this, like they're very like glued to their screens. But to get off the screen and like be outside, meeting people, go to the gallery openings, go to the shows, you know, go to the workshops and like meet people.
So Jasper, you're an artist, an illustrator, a curator, an event organizer. If you're not doing one thing, you're doing 20 other things. Do you actually experience creative block?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I experience block all the time. But I think for myself, like after so many years, you kind of like, when you get blocked, you don't, like, I think for you guys too, like you don't try to force yourself through the block. It was more like to sort of like get away from the block to give yourself some breathing room. So I found things that I like doing that can either like relieve stress or get my mind occupied, or places where like I feel more creative. One thing is like travel, of course. When I go to Japan, I'm like firing. Like there is so much like visual stimuli. Like I need to like, I'm like taking photos of like everything and like drawing and writing everything, you know, because it's like there's so many ideas coming because there's so much stuff going on. Another place is just someplace like quiet. Like some people are like, oh, you know what? I have like kids. I have everything. My household is noisy. But some of my ideas really come from in the shower. Just like standing in the shower, like all the white noise, just sitting in there and just like thinking, letting your mind wander. You also have like, you can also draw stuff too on it. So like the shower's always been good. Also like, let me say, but pooping. Morning poops are sacred. I think for most of us, it's sacred. For most guys, it's sacred. It's like, this is like my private time. Like, I'm just going to be here for like an hour, even though I don't need to be, because I just need to like process stuff. So, you know, there's that, you know, working out also helps, you know, just to get your mind away. And I think, and also I'm a book addict. So I have like way too many books. I'm like surrounded by books, and I'll like just grab a book, look through the book, you know, etc. You know, watch a movie, play video games. all those kinds of things. Find that stuff that you love and just like don't feel guilty in that you're sort of enjoying stuff that's like, oh, I'm super busy. I shouldn't like enjoy myself. I shouldn't go play a video game because I'm super busy. But sometimes just stopping to play a video game will help inform the work, get you refreshed, relieve some stress, maybe get you inspired to go back again later. So I always feel like enjoy those, like give yourself those moments to like do stuff that you enjoy, because it does help with the work that you're doing, especially as a creative.
So I can never ask you to pick a favorite, but are there pieces or places from these events that have been especially memorable to you?
Less so pieces, I would say, and more so experiences with the artist or traveling and doing different things. So there's tons of experiences, really amazing experiences that I've had with artists traveling and working and making things happen, or just one-on-one time, or just us just going on adventures. It's hard for me to pick a specific piece because it's like kind of choosing your favorite kid. Like I helped to make all those happen, so it's hard to pick which one. But I definitely have experiences in my head that stand out from just like doing the work and traveling all these years.
Well, and you've sort of alluded to this with some of your other responses, but I have to ask, one of my favorite things to talk to creatives about is self-doubt and imposter syndrome. To what extent has either played a role in your work, and how have you overcome those feelings?
Yeah, I think both of things are big things, especially for young artists. Like imposter syndrome, I think that should just be gone. Like, no one's an imposter. And like the feelings of self-doubt, for sure. There's definitely a lot of that throughout the years, and I definitely also felt imposter syndrome like when I was coming up, for sure. Because especially when you're trying to find your style and you're not sure about it. And then you kind of sometimes lean on stuff that you like a lot to try to like figure out where your work or what you're sort of most drawn to. But sometimes you just gotta sort of just like create work, whether it's like bad, that doesn't matter. You just have to create. I think the hardest, dealing with that really is about sort of having group of peers and people that can be honest with you, that can also give you constructive criticism and that you can share work with, and that can also help you get better as well. I think oftentimes being an artist can be a very solitary pursuit. You oftentimes are in your studio by yourself, painting, doing your own thing, and you're on your own. And then it's good to then sort of have people that you can sort of go to and talk to and share with. That's like beyond just like social media, people that you know in person. I think it's good to sort of be around, so then what I've been doing in the past is that I recognized that in Hawaii, we don't have artist studio spaces. And that rent can be, for a lot of people, like too expensive and too much of a financial burden to take on. So they'll end up working out of their homes, whether it be in their living room or their garage, their balconies. And so I decided to try to find ways to provide spaces for artists here. So for the past decade, I rented out a warehouse that I turned into like artist studios, and there's about like 30 artists in there. Recently, we can't be there anymore, so I found another space where like there's different like units that can also be artist studios. So then being a part of these kind of spaces are really great, because then you're also around other artists that you can share with and talk to and be around. And also just like sort of like be honest about it, share that you have self-doubt. Don't keep it in. I think one thing that I can share, which I don't share often, is that I grew up with depression, but I didn't recognize depression. And I think that's also because I'm second generation Chinese too, where like they don't recognize depression as much either. Like the previous generations, it's like you're just sad, like get over it. It's sort of the mentality. I recognized that it was actually depression when I was much older. When it started when my parents are divorced, so my dad left when I was 12. And I grew up without a father. Like my father pretty much abandoned us to a degree. I still see him like once in like a great while. I'll talk to him here and there, but he was mostly out of our lives when I was around 12. And I didn't realize how much that affected me until I was older. Whether it be sort of like abandonment issues and depression, etc. So nowadays, when I start feeling it, or when I start to recognize those symptoms, I talk about it.
I get a lot of secondhand joy when others experience something fantastic. So I'm curious to know, when was the last time you were awed?
I mean, I'm always in awe. I think when I even look at other people's artwork, I'm like, I don't even know how they did that. Like, that's pretty amazing. Like, there's so much people doing such amazing work, like globally, like every day, that I'm like, oh man, like, why do I keep doing this? Like, people are doing such amazing work, you know, like it's always an inspiration. I'm always in awe. I think the last time I was like really like blown away in person, well, I mean, I just came back from like some of my festivals, so just seeing the artists like do such large scale work and sharing their work and working with people. We worked with, and this most recent festival in Hawaii, we worked with the Daniels, who directed Everything Everywhere All at Once. So I brought them in to do a talk in Hawaii, and then they kind of gave back and also like did a workshop for kids at a public school that was for kids in public housing. And the kids honestly, the kids probably had like no idea who they were and had no idea the caliber of director that they were like making short films with. I think one day it'll click and I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe I like did a short film with like a Academy Award winning director. But you know, I was in awe sort of like being in their presence and watching them work with kids, which was also very humbling because they were like such big artists that they were willing they're such big directors that they're willing to give back and to come to Hawaii like and volunteer. In terms of like an experiential thing, the last time I went to Tokyo and I went to Team Lab Planet, and I went in without any sort of expectations, and what they built there in terms of like an experiential art space was pretty mind-blowing in terms of how they were able to tap into different senses, you know, because they would like have areas where like basically you go and you couldn't even like wear shoes, like take off your shoes because you're going to get wet. You're going to waddle through water. And I was like, just that sort of like, just to throw like, okay, here's an art space, but we're going to like throw you off. It's like, first go to this locker room, take off your shoes. And now you're going to be like walking in water. And like, just that alone was like, wow, it's like, you know, and then my kids loved it. So it's really for like all ages. They really enjoyed it. So whenever people go to Tokyo, I'm like, definitely try to, at the very minimum, go to the Team Lab Planets install. It's not expensive. It's in Toyosu. It's not that far from the main centers of Tokyo. And it's totally worth it. And I was really like blown away. I was like, we need to do more stuff. Like we need to do like more like experiential art projects. Where like we're not just like looking at art visually, but like feeling it, smelling it, you know, like really sort of like being immersed in it. I'm like, it was really inspiring. Like I really want to do more stuff like that.
Well, this is going to be the next iteration of Worldwide Walls.
Yeah, it's just gonna. I was like, how much would this cost? It's probably like millions and millions of dollars to build this thing. But yeah, it's like really cool though.
I'm totally floored by what you just said. Everyone's eyes are going to roll out of their head when they hear this, but Everything Everywhere All at Once is like my favorite film I've ever seen. And so I can't tell you how cool that is that you got the Daniels to come and do workshops with students. That's incredible.
Yeah, they were great. Like both Daniels are amazing. Then Daniel Kwan's wife, Kirsten Lepore, is also like an award-winning animation director. Like she was the animation director for Marcel the Shell, the film that they did, and she also did all the Groot shorts for Disney Plus. So she's amazing. She taught my daughter how to do like stop motion animation. She got like really into. So yeah, we've been working. We did an Everything Everywhere All at Once mural dedicated to them in Long Beach, California. It was painted by Lauren YS, and I learned through them and through her that like Tobo Jabaki, did I pronounce that right? The main villain, the daughter, they actually based a part of her on Lauren YS, who's an artist that I've been working with forever. And so then they were super excited to sort of meet her in person because she was there in Hawaii, because she has roots in Hawaii as well. And we got Daniel, one of the Daniels, to help paint her mural with her in Hawaii as well.
That's incredible. I'm curious to know, I want to turn the tables and I want to ask you, Rich, when was the last time that you were awed by something?
I mean, I was awed by that story, Jasper. I mean, I would say most recently, I've been playing with AI and mostly like Midjourney, doing like image generation. And one of their new tools it just came out with is like their selective tool. So, you know, if you generate an image, you really like that image, maybe there's a few things in there that you want to tweak. Before, you didn't have that possibilities. So now you can actually just do a region and regenerate that with a new prompt. And that's been my new awe. I've been playing with that for the past week. Yeah. So what about you, Eric? I mean, what's the last thing that you've been awed?
Well, I know we're talking a lot about art today. I'm going to go grab it really quickly. Just a sec. Maybe I should have taken this off the wall before we started recording, but I recently commissioned an artist to paint a skateboard for me. I'll try to show it to the screen as best I can. I'll kind of turn it and hold it diagonally. But it's this artist from Michigan, and he's an artist who paints in the Northwest Coast style, kind of tribal artwork, but he fuses it with mid-century modern furniture furnishings, which is this really interesting juxtaposition. So anyway, I reached out to him. I'll hold this up again just because it's so beautiful. I constantly have to walk past this in my house to look at it.
Screen printed, or is it like brushed by hand? Like it's so clean.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I'm so impressed and amazed by this. It's all hand brushed, and I'm going to hold it up to the camera just so you can see the quality of the line work. I mean, even to see it in person is, truly, truly insane. Well, and this is going to be a little bit how the sausage gets made, but as we wrap up these recordings for Experiential Design Week 2023, one thing that's really amazed me is just the generosity of our guests. We wished and we hoped, but when we started this process, I don't think we expected the level of enthusiasm and willingness that our guests have shown us. I've been stunned by everyone's gracious spirit. The goodwill has been incredible. So it just shows that creatives enjoy inspiring others with their stories. And for that, we are eternally grateful.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for having me be a part of it. It's an honor for me as well.
Jasper, this has been such an inspiring and incredible conversation. I've admired your work for a long time. I'm so grateful to have finally gotten the opportunity to chat with you. So thank you for speaking with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks for joining us for Experiential Design Week, an annual series by IA Interior Architects. If you enjoyed today's discussion, and if you appreciate great design, we invite you to visit interiorarchitects.com/EDW for more conversations with the incredible creatives we admire. While you're there, you can learn more about IA and discover the remarkable work our studios are producing around the globe.